In this video, we will talk about most popular Hibernate interview questions, and these interview questions are asked irrespective of level of experience. So let's start. First question. Do you know difference between open session and get current session? If we talk about open session and get current session, the first point for open session is it returns always a new session object on every request call. You should need to do explicitly flush and close of the session and use when you need session object on every method call or every request call, and you want to manage the session manually rather than depending upon the Hibernate. If we talk about get current session, then get current session returns same session object if already exists. Otherwise, create a new session and return that session. Session will get auto flush and auto close because these attributes are set to true. You need to configure one property in hibernate.cfg.xml that is also Hibernate configuration file, and the property is hibernate.current_session_context_class and the value as thread. It is used when you're not sure about the existing session and the transaction that your method is doing requires a long time. Moving to next question. Tell me about get and load method. Again, this interview question is most asked question and most popular question also, irrespective of the levels of experience. So to begin with the answer, first point for get, it is used to fetch data for a given identifier. Identifier means a primary key or unique key through which you can get the data. For load also, you need to fetch data for a given identifier. Eager loading of data is done in case of get. We will look at what is meant by eager loading. In case of load, it is lazy loading of data. Get return null if not found in DB. Load throw object not found exception if not present in DB. Get is slower as comparison to load method. Load is slightly faster than get method. If you're not confirmed about existence of data through the identifier, you should use get. If you're confirmed about existence of data either in the session cache or the session, then use load. Get is declared through session object. Load is also declared through session object. If you see, I have highlighted few text in green color. The reason is, as an interviewer, I am very much interested to get these things as an answer so that I can further dig the person who is giving the answer on the basis of that. Sometimes instead of asking the difference between get and load method, interviewer can ask the opposite, similarity between get and load method. So if you see the first point, fetch data for a given identifier, and the last point, declared through session object, is common to both of the method. Now let's understand why I said eager loading and return null I'm much interested, because this gives me that the person who is telling me has either deep knowledge of Hibernate or not, or at least the functioning of this get and load method. Let's talk about get method first. I have here a DB and a value is stored in DB with ID equal to 1 and name equal to Byte programming. Now, how do I call this object associated with id equal to 1 or fetch this object associated with id equal to 1 through this get method. If you look at the syntax, we have byte equal to session.get, passing the model class byte programming.class and a serializable instance of the identifier. Here new integer 1. So when my program run and I call this get method, it will directly hit to the DB and the response is returned and is stored in byte. Now the response will consist of id equal to 1, name equal to byte programming. But the restriction is the value should not be already present in the session cache. Otherwise, the value will be get from session cache instead of hitting the DB. Now, what happens if this value is not present in DB? When you call the get method, instead of getting the response, you will get null if the value is not present in DB. Let's move to load method. Again, we have a DB and a value is present inside this DB with id equal to 1, name equal to byte programming. When we fetch this object associated with id equal to 1 through byte equal to session.load byte programming.class new integer, what will happen? When the program runs and you call session.load, instead of directly hitting the DB, proxy object is created, and this proxy object has an identifier only associated with that, the same as that is present in the DB. So if you look, the value that is returned to byte will be id equal to 1, name blank. Till here, no database call is made. Now, what if I call byte.getName to fetch the name only? In that case, a database call is made because you called a method other than the identifier itself. And then the whole response is returned to you, id equal to 1, name equal to byte programming. Now, if you see, in case of get method, a database call is made if session cache is not present. In case of load, no database call is made. Instead, a proxy is returned to you, and that consists of id equal to 1 as an identifier only. Now, in case if the id equal to 1, name equal to byte programming object is not present in DB, instead of null as you get in get method, an object not found exception will be thrown to you. I hope till this point you would be able to understand the difference between get and load through this pictorial representation. Now, the point I said earlier, right? This is called eager loading because you're calling directly from the DB when you hit this get method. Here it is called lazy loading. You're not returning the whole object itself, you're returning a proxy object. So when a method other than getID is called, you will return the whole object id equal to 1, name equal to byte programming. So this is called lazy loading of the object. So with respect to practical approach, if you look at the two scenario, let's move ahead and see. First is stock purchase and sale, and other is cart swipe at POS machine. So in case of this stock purchase and sell, whenever you purchase a stock or whenever you sell an object, consider it as a transaction. So as an individual, if you're doing 10 transactions in a day, and similarly like you, there could be millions and billions of people who are doing the transaction. And those transactions, if you look, it might happen at the same moment. So it could be like millions of transactions per second or billions of transactions per second. depending upon the stock market condition. Now in that case, if you use get method, you are calling simultaneously database, and this will give a significant rise to performance backwardness. In case if you use the load method, instead of directly calling the database, what you need an ID, a unique ID to associate the purchase of a single stock or sale, and after that you can do a bulk or batch transactions. So here you are seeing a slight performance improvement in comparison to the get. Similarly, at card swipe POC machine, when you swipe your card, either credit card or debit card or any other card, you're doing a transaction. So if you use get method, it would be a slight performance backwardness present in your system. So think of any scenario where you need only ID to be associated with your process. Instead of fetching the whole object, you should use load. But if you need the whole object, then it's better to use get method. Let's move to the next popular question. How should I fetch list of object through get or load method? Now this question is similar to the previous question. So if you look at the syntax of get or load method, you will see that it is not possible to fetch list of object directly through get or load method. The reason is get or load method takes a single identifier only. It does not take list of objects. Moving to next question. What design patterns are used in Hibernate? Again, this is a very much important question because it will open a new dimension to the interviewer to ask upon the design pattern depending upon what you know. So the most popular design patterns that you can see in Hibernate is proxy, DAO, facet, and factory. Proxy and facet you should focus because Hibernate is mostly based on a proxy design pattern. Similarly, Spring is also based on proxy design pattern. So this is an important design pattern you can say. Moving to next question. Can you log generated SQL queries by Hibernate? How? In a very simple terms, if you want to answer, you can say that you should use show_SQL equal to true. Another way you can do is provide the logging label of Hibernate SQL as debug. Now this syntax logging.label.org.hibernate.sql is in particular with Spring Boot. So_SQL equal to true is present in hibernate.cfg.xml and it is a part of your jar. So inside hibernate.cfg.xml you are writing property name equal to show_SQL value true and property closed. Now in case you don't need to show the SQL, what you need to do is you have to change show_SQL either as a false or remove this property from hibernate.cfg.xml. Again, it would require to deploy your jar or var when you do this because this is a part of your jar or var. Now, if you see the second point where you write this syntax logging.label.org.hibernate.sql, in case of Spring Boot, you are writing in application.properties, and if you change anything inside application.properties, you don't need to re-push your application jars or var. You can do in microservices with the help of config server also. That is where 12-factor design pattern comes in factor with respect to microservice. Similarly, if you want to change the SQL logging label for different environment, you can use another property application-dev.properties or application-qa, application-prod, this kind of properties file, and put the logging label also. For example, here we can put error for application-dev.properties. If you want to use pure Hibernate instead of Spring Boot, you can do so through a logging framework. For example, if you're using a Log4j XML and pure Hibernate in your project, then you can do so by log4j.logger.org.hibernate.sql. The value could be any log levels. You can see how an interviewer could be impressed if you say the both of these things, because you're not giving any room to the interviewer to ask further on this question. Moving to next question. Is it good to turn on SQL logging for production environment? Most of you will say no, generally don't prefer. But is it right way? In my view, yes, we should not prefer to turn on SQL logging except for errors part. Then how would you do so? It's better to set the log label of Hibernate as error, and in order to do so, as discussed previously, we can use logging.label.org.hibernate equal to error. I am setting all the logs of Hibernate to print on the console or to a file only when an error comes. Moving to next question. How to validate the schema? You can use hpm2ddl property equal to validate in order to validate the schema. In case of Spring Boot, if you're using a JPA repository, you can use spring.jpa.hibernate.ddl-auto and the value should be validate. If you're using pure Hibernate configurations, then you can use hibernate.hbm2ddl.auto equal to validate. Apart from validate, there are other values of hbm2ddl also, and these are validate, create, drop, update, none, create only, and drop. And out of these values, the most common that I have seen asked in interview is validate and create drop. Moving to next question. I want to fetch all the values in a particular column from a table. How you do? Again, there are multiple ways to do so depending upon what you're using, JPQL, JPA criteria builder or projections from Hibernate. So you can say you can use projections from Hibernate. You can use JPA criteria builder. You can use JPQL also. Let's see at some syntax of these three things. Let's assume that we have an entity class called Byte programming and two values present, ID as a primary key and a username of type string. So in case of JPQL or a native SQL query, we can do a simple thing. Query equal to entity manager dot create query. What you are writing? Select username from Byte programming and returning the result and storing it in a ref list object. Entity manager is used in Hibernate. In case of Spring Boot, if you are explicitly providing the custom data source, then you have to create an entity manager also, otherwise it will be taken care by the auto configuration of the Spring Boot. In case of JPA criteria builder, we can write the syntax as first create a criteria builder through entity manager, then create a query using builder.createQuery. If you see, I am passing the return type of the column that I am going to use. So here I am returning the username column, so its return type is a string. So here I am passing inside create query string.class. Then query.from byteprogramming.class, that is my model class. And what I am doing, query.select byte.get username. username is nothing but the column, and then returning the result of this query. If you see the projection of Hibernate, that is a pure basic of Hibernate to fetch the columns, then the syntax would be session.createCriteria, passing the model as byteprogramming.class, and criteria.setProjection, projections.property username, that is my column name. Now this will give you a single column through projections. So when you say this, interviewer can ask you how to do a multiple column fetch through projection. Simple thing, you can use add operations on the projections and return multiple column values also. This was all about most popular Hibernate interview questions. If you have experienced any other interview questions that are mostly asked other than this, put that in the comment and I will create videos on that. Also mention how you like this video either through hitting the like button or commenting in the comment section. Stay tuned and subscribe for more upcoming videos.